Zautke, and welcome to another edition of the Traction Reaction Podcast. Joining me, of course, is George Phillips from oilpressure.com. George, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here.
And we're going to be talking about, of course, the Big Machine Music Grand Prix in your hometown of Nashville. So I thought, IndyCar race in Nashville, who better to chat to than somebody from Nashville? So give us just a kind of a thumbnail sketch of how this all developed and how the momentum has been building in the city up until this point.
Well, you've probably heard for years that there have been numerous attempts to get some type of a street race going in Nashville. Even back right after the series left the super speedway back in 2008, there were talks that there was going to be a street race going over the Cumberland River. Everybody kind of laughed that off, made the obvious comparisons to Driven and everything. And so that kind of died. And then I think after Joseph Newgarden got big in IndyCar, it picked up some steam again. Then it died. This thing went 3 or 4 lives before it finally took hold last summer. In fact, 12 months ago, this race had not even been announced yet. It was announced in September, and they showed us the track layout going over the Cumberland River like the original plan was. And when I first looked at it, I was very skeptical. And then just before the race, when they showed the Romain Grosjean video through the simulator, I was thinking, this thing might actually be racy. And then, of course, what we saw, and I'm still, and not just because I live here in Nashville, I'm defending the race, but I still think the track was a little bit better than what people are saying. I mean, the whole track and the race itself is kind of being crucified on social media. But I was in the post-race press conference last night, Sunday night, and both Dixon and Hinchcliffe said the track is fine. It's just that people were too impatient. They're trying to force things in places that they couldn't do it. Sure. So, but anyway, that's kind of getting ahead of your question. The question was, how did this thing get started? It just started gathering momentum really over the last 10 years or so, and then just suddenly came to fruition last summer.
And Scott Borchetta, of course, is with Big Machine Records, is truly the guy behind this, and he was able to line up a big amount of sponsors. You got a lot of community interest, which I think is very important, and it seemed like the city was behind this. Now, granted, this is the inaugural event, and I think city leaders may have been a little hesitant. How much are we going to let them use? So I think maybe next year, with the success of this, they may be able to expand the footprint a little bit and maybe just make it a little more racier. People are like throwing up their arms saying, "Oh, it's awful, this, that, and the other thing." But it's not etched in stone. I'm sure there are improvements. They've done the same thing with Long Beach over the years, and they've done this with other street tracks. And I think if they do that and change a couple corners here or there, I think it can be a really racy event and a good event. And like I said, the number one thing that's so important if you're going to do something like this is have the city behind it, especially the leaders in that. I saw they had one of your channel on YouTube, I think it was Channel 5. They had 5 people at the event. They had 5 remotes set up. That somebody who worked at the Milwaukee Mile. We used to beg to get one guy, especially on local TV. There was a lot of coverage of it, wasn't there?
There was a lot of buzz about this event. As you mentioned, I saw representatives from all the local stations on site. There was a local radio station that was carrying the race broadcast live but on Saturday morning they do a 1-hour race show on the radio, and this past Saturday they did a 2-hour special, called it the Music City Grand Preview, and it was very good. I mean, they had a lot of the drivers interviewed on there. Couldn't pronounce a couple of the names correctly, but what do you expect here in the South? They had especially a lot of trouble with Takuma. They kept calling him Takuma Sada, but you can forgive that. but they did have a lot of buzz. And you mentioned Long Beach. Of course, we're talking about several decades now, but
Right.
Long Beach's track has just gone through tremendous evolution over the years. And really, about the only thing left from the original track, I think, is the hairpin and the main straightaway. But it's gone through several changes. I know several other temporary street circuits that have come and gone. They went through evolutions as well. So you're right; it's not carved in stone. And I think one key point to this is why the city was so free to work with them, so to speak, is and it was very driven to every person here in Nashville. There was not a cent of taxpayer money that went to this. This was all
Yeah.
private funding. I don't know if that's going to be the case going forward, but that point was really made to the public, because I know in other areas there's been a lot of public pushback, and I think they just wanted
Mhm.
to avoid that on the front end.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know there's a lot of bars and restaurants and whatnot. Really, I'm sure they embraced this and welcomed all those race fans and all the teams in that and all the people involved with the setup of it, just bringing in that business into downtown. But now let's talk about the race, the event itself, and a lot of, I guess the buzz was there's a lot of people in the stands. This was their first race. So, and the part, this, I don't want to sound harsh, but part of, they didn't know that it was a bad race. They just thought it was cool that there was all these race cars running by. Is that kind of like the same feedback you were getting?
I think so. It's just sort of like somebody going to their first football game. I mean, it
Sure.
could just be a snoozer of a game, but the fact that they're sitting there live in front of an NFL game, that's all they really care about. So I think you're right. I talked to a couple of people at work today that did go, and they were sitting in those prime seats as they were coming down the bridge heading into turn 9, and they just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I was expecting them to kind of just dog the race, but no, they had a
Yeah.
good time. Now, I will say that I had several coworkers that did not go to the race, and they've never been to an IndyCar race at all, but they've heard me talking about it for years. And plus the fact that it's in Nashville, they wanted to tune in. So they tuned in and watched their very first IndyCar race this weekend.
Mhm.
And probably about three-fourths of the way through the race, I started getting these texts from different people asking, do they have these many crashes in every IndyCar race? And I was having to text back, no. In fact, the last one I went to, there was only one caution. But uh, it so it's a mixed bag. I think the national, I'm not even going to say the national media. I think the national media has been fair. I think the fans on social media nationwide have absolutely crucified this race,
Mhm.
but locally, I'm not sure they knew it was a stinker.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of, if you looked at what Robin Miller wrote, his headline was right band, wrong song, and I kind
Right.
of agree that it was the right venue and everything. It just didn't work out as best as it could have. And like I said, it's the inaugural event. Usually with events like this, the hardest thing is logistics and everybody involved with it. This seemed like that's the hardest part. They had that's already in place. They got the sponsorship in place. Now, like I said, all they need to do is tweak that course a little bit and maybe go to Nashville, go to the city and say, we need a little bit of a larger footprint so they can maybe expand it, like I said, and smooth out some of those corners, make them a bit longer, and so they don't have to be so tight.
And you know what I think the city is really waiting on? I think they want to see how long it's going to take them to take this thing down. How long today, tomorrow, however long it has to go, where the barriers are still
Sure.
surrounding the streets of Nashville. I think that's something that people are a little curious about. But I agree. The logistics they did it right. The promotion, they did it right. The ownership group, they did it right. They did a whole lot of things right. There are some things that obviously nothing's going to be perfect, especially on an
Sure.
inaugural event. There are some things that need to be tweaked there on the grounds. Probably my biggest complaint was there was really only one pedestrian footbridge to get from the stadium side of things, which was sort of the heart of the track, over into the paddock area. And I saw, and everybody had to go that way. There was no alternate route. I saw Roger Penske on that footbridge one time, and Sunday morning we followed Chip Ganassi across the footbridge. And oddly enough, nobody recognized either one of them. They just let them keep going about their way. But it was, if you've ever gone under the tunnel at Indianapolis Motor Speedway about 45 minutes before the race starts, that's what that footbridge was like yesterday.
Okay.
You could not get through there. So they need to do something to alleviate that. Plus, just it was placed in a very inconvenient spot where you had to walk way down, then come back to get across just to get to the paddock. But that's a small thing. The staff needs more education. A lot of them didn't seem to know where things were, or who was allowed through what gate or whatever. But that's normal. There was one hiccup that the promoter is catching some grief on, and really it's not their fault, but I'm sure you've heard about the grandstand 6 that did not get built before Friday morning. And that's kind of a symptom of what's plaguing a lot of cities now, is the labor shortage. The contractor that was hired to build these grandstands, they just flat out did not have enough workers to get it erected in time. They finally put it together overnight Saturday night, and it was ready to go on Sunday morning, but it caught a lot of bad press for that.
Well, I mean, yeah, they should. I can understand that, but I remember the Super Bowl in Dallas with the Steelers and the Packers. They were doing the same thing at Jerry World on the day of the Super Bowl. They were putting up bleachers, temporary bleachers, just for the Super Bowl. So that's not uncommon to happen. To happen at big events. But yeah, especially with this with the labor shortages going on. We were up at Road America this weekend for the IMSA event, and a lot of the restaurants and resorts are still having issues with a lot of the kids aren't coming in that usually did. Some of them that come over from overseas are unable to, and a lot of the resorts were down minimum at least 100 people pretty much throughout the summer. The 3 large resorts up in Elkhart Lake. Now let's move forward to the race. Now, going into this, if you watch practice and qualifying on the Peacock network, Colton Herta was just pretty much putting up a bitch slapping on everybody. He was a half a second quicker than everybody. And at the beginning of the race, you're thinking, when to sing flag to flag. And then we had the Marcus Ericsson situation. What was your, when you were there, when you saw Ericsson flying through the air, you're thinking, okay, that's a DNF for Bourdais and a DNF for Ericsson, didn't you?
I did. And in fact, just looking at it as it was happening, I was thinking that Ericsson actually caught the worst of it.
Sure. Yeah.
At first glance. And so you knew, even if he was able to get back out, or if either one of them were able to get back out, that they were toast. They were just going to be running around the back all day. And then then suddenly, and I'll qualify this. I have not seen the race broadcast yet. And you know how when you're at a race, you don't fully know what all's going on as much as you do in front of a television. But all of a sudden, I noticed that Ericsson came in for a off-schedule pit stop. So I'm thinking, okay, well, they're going to try a new strategy or whatever. But I kept waiting for him to cycle back to the back as the pit stop shuffles continued, and it just didn't happen. And I've heard that there was some confusion with Herta's pit stop and whatever, but I know that's when things kind of got good. About lap 60, I remember thinking to myself, suddenly this race is actually getting good, because Herta kept picking people off one by one, and he was, when he got up to second, it didn't take him any time to get on Ericsson's gearbox. But
yeah, it certainly seemed like an Andretti Autosport race with Herta running so strong and Rossi, and then you had Ryan Hunter Ray probably running one of his strongest races for in so far this year. And out of nowhere, you look at the end of the race, you have Ganassi running 1-2, and then even with Alex Palou, who had kind of a bummer of a race, finishing seventh.
And I think Palou was kind of lucky to finish seventh because
Yeah.
he was he caught up in that 11 car pileup.
For these competitors, you had Dixon having an off day, he gets on the podium, and here you have Hinchcliffe, who's probably running his best race, and he finishes third behind a guy who's didn't have probably his best race.
I was in the post race press conference last night, and he seemed just elated. I mean, he was just ecstatic. Of course, he's got a good sense of humor anyway, but he was just uh, whipping off one-liners one after the other. And Dixon was in a good mood too. They were both very lively, and they were in there before Ericsson came in. Ericsson was reserved like he normally is, but even he could not believe that he won that race after taking the flight that he did at the first of the race.
Give us a couple of observations that you saw that maybe the person watching at TV didn't see.
So far as the race or the crowd,
or everything, anything, something during the press conference that kind of caught your eye that you think back, oh yeah, I remember that was kind of interesting. Like something that's similar, like when you said about the walkways going over the bridges, that was kind of interesting too. But anything else that kind of sticks out in your mind?
well, you touched on it earlier. The fans, regardless of the fact that they were watching a stinker, or regardless of the fact that they were in just some areas were very, very crowded, they had a blast. I'm too old to have gone to any of the concerts that they had after the races, but they were showing them while we were in the media center after each session that night, and place looked packed. I mean, everybody had seemed to have a very good time.
So there were concerts after the race too then?
Oh yes,
Okay.
there was an Alan Jackson concert last night, Sunday night after the race.
Did that help with the crowd leaving then? Is so, I suppose?
No, because
No.
everybody, we were all going, because I was in the pits, and to get out of the pits, I just needed to go right across the track to the media center, but I too had to go all the way to that bridge that was over turn 3, cross over, and then to go walk back to about the 50-yard line of the stadium. And so we were all crossing this bridge, but while most of them were veering left to go to the concert, I went right. And of course, Victory Lane was that way too, so a lot of people were going to Victory Lane.
Vintage Indy registry was there with their vintage Indy cars. Did you get a chance to see them?
I did. I was just like all the fans there. I was over leaning against the fence, taking videos as they went by. And I don't know if this is just a function of my ripe old age or what, but I still, when those cars run, I still always really like to see the Joe Leonard Lotus go by, the turbine.
Mm-hmm.
Even people that looked old, they were like, "What is that?" And they had no clue what this car was. And but I could tell I was getting into a real education mode, and somebody really didn't. I could tell they really didn't really want to hear it. But it was really just a foreign concept to them that there was a jet powered car out there, and they thought it was something from the future. I said, no, that's really from about 50 years ago. But what made me feel old was, and they totally convinced them that I was old. I saw that car qualify on the pole and race in the race in 1968. But I always love to see that car run.
Well, very good, George. We appreciate you taking time visiting with us, and plug your site.
Oilpressure.com, and I did this a lot this weekend. I post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every 52 weeks a year throughout the off season, except in the month of May, I post every day. But I'm not a reporter. I just pound out my own thoughts and opinions, and for whatever reason, some people seem to like it.
Are you excited about the Titans this year?
I am. In fact, I got a very good picture that I didn't post it on my post, but I did post it on my Twitter site. Ryan Tannehill was in Hunter Ray's pit yesterday and got a good shot of him and a shot of his wife too. But
I think I remember her on Hard Knocks.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Same. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. But I think our offense is going to be very formidable if our defense can just kind of keep the opponents down some. I think we're going to have a good season. So the Colts season has kind of gone into the dirt before it even got started.
All right. Well, George, we certainly appreciate it. Make sure to check out oilpressure.com. This is Steve Zautke along with George Phillips on the Traction Reaction podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like the videos, but make sure you do that. Appreciate it, George. Take care. We'll see you again soon.
Okay.